If you'd have to give a very brief, very brief definition of what the term post-democracy means, let's say in a few sentences, what would it be?
Post-democracy would be like post-industrialism. Post-industrial society, we have all the products of industry. Industrial activity continues, but the energy, the dynamism of the economy has gone somewhere else. So when I use post-democracy with the same idea. All the institutions of democracy remain, we use them. It's just that the energy of the political system, its innovative capacity, has moved to other spheres.
Okay. Since your analysis and the criticism that you came up with in your book is focused very much on the Anglo-Saxon system of democracy, why is it that the book did get such a great response in Europe, where there's many countries have multi-party systems, not only systems like in the US, for instance?
It was based originally on British, American and Italian experience, and the book was published first in Italy, in fact, and had big resonance with the public there that I could understand because of the Berlusconi phenomenon. I have been surprised at the resonance the book had in Germany and Austria. And I am slightly puzzled by it. I think it may simply be that my thought processes are more accessible to German people than to English-speaking people, possibly.
I always wondered, when I read your book and you see the crisis of the classic democracy started in the 1980s or something like that. It was the same time that the neoliberal doctrine became very popular in the US and the UK, and Thatcher and Reagan started it. The massive offshoring and privatization of the public sector. David Harvey mentioned it in a very brief video, saying that in Central Europe people like to call it an Anglo-Saxon disease. Is there a coincidence between the decline of the functionality of democracy and the neoliberal doctrine, and really come to a privatization of politics? What are the coincidences?
Yeah, they are very closely related. And in a new book I've just written about why neoliberalism survived the financial crisis, which should have made it very vulnerable, I've tried to make these links. It's a very close relationship indeed, yes, because the growing power of large corporations is a fundamental aspect of the shift to post-democracy. When I say the political energy of the system has gone elsewhere, it has gone to rather secret private discourse between great global corporations and governments.
Your thesis came out a few years ago, don't say much about the European Union and the Euro system, which is the current topic of the day. So can we get a brief statement on what your personal opinions are about the perspectives of both the EU and the stability of the Euro system, maybe? What do you think?
Well, fundamentally, the European Union is a very optimistic sign, because one of the problems that democracy has is that the economy is global and democracy remains very, very national. The European Union is a means of getting beyond that. Unfortunately, the European project, as it's now defined, is a very neoliberal project. In particular, the monetary union is more Anglo-Saxon than the Anglo-Saxons. This is a design fault of the system for which Europe is now suffering.
If we see the rise of nationalism in Central Europe, is a common economic government on basis of the European Union possible in the future, for the nationalist tendencies tend to rise even more? So do you think this is a realistic possibility that there will come to
No, I mean, sadly, the prospect is very poor. But there are these two things. On the one side, neoliberalism, which means that as Fritz Sharp, the great German political scientist, has argued, market making is a negative form of constructing Europe. It's much more easy to do than positive institution building. So that's one set of problems. The other set of problems is that national reaction to globalization is increasingly taking this xenophobic form. Now, these are two very, very negative forces preventing the construction of a good social Europe.
What started as a protest movement against unemployment and failing political system in Spain with the slogan "Real Democracy Now" is now swapped over to other parts of Europe and the US, especially where the Occupy Wall Street movement has created a heavy media attention. What seems to be the beginning of a global rise of resistance to some situations created by governments. Is this what you expect to be a way out of the post-democratic dilemma? In Austria, there's a big discussion about the traditional forms of participation versus new forms of political participation, e.g. It's better to found a party because this is the way that the representative system gives us to make an influence on the situation.
Well, we need both parties and civil society initiatives. We cannot expect parties to do this alone unless there is a real strong feeling in the public opinion that something must be done about this financial system and about this form of capitalism we have. The parties, we cannot expect the parties to create that by themselves. So we need to support movements and protests that articulate this concern and to try to create a strong movement of public opinion to which the parties can then respond. Okay. So I don't see parties and Bürgerinitiativen as alternatives. They're necessary to each other.
Those are bonded, okay. Much has been written and said about the role of the new forms of technology and systems of communication, like in social media. Richard Wilkinson mentioned the potential of information and the conflict over restrictions on it. So do you think they bear the capabilities to help in establishing a more democratic society and more active citizens in a democratic sense, or do they lead, probably, as skeptics say, to a decline of public interest in politics?
Well, they are serving very well in assisting organisations with very slim resources. I think it's rather similar to the history of newspapers. When mass newspapers started, the existing elites were not interested in them and did not control them. There was a great diversity of ownership, and this helped all kinds of opposition opinion, liberal groups, working class groups, anti-religious groups. Eventually, the great power centres understood this and began to buy up newspapers and now control most of them. And I expect we shall see the same with new media, but at the moment we are living in the period where they are useful and are being used by all kinds of groups.
Okay, thanks a lot for the interview. Thank you.
Okay.